My story does not begin with a crown or a suit of armor. It begins in the whispering dark of a caravan fire, under a sky choked with the smoke of other people's wars. I was born Magnus, son of Ilara and Caspar Vex, in the wandering clan of the Hailstrom people. We had no nation, only the roads of a world that despised us. My mother, she was our light. She could mend the broken wing with a song and read futures in the embers of a dying flame. A healer, they called her. A witch, whispered the soldiers of the Iron Crown who hunted us. I remember the scent of her herbs, the warmth of her hand on my forehead when the night grew cold. But I also remember the cold that replaced it. I was 7 summers old when the shadow found us. A lord of the Iron Crown lay dying, his flesh rotting from within. Desperate, his men raided our camp, dragging my mother before him. They demanded a miracle. She warned them, some fevers are not of the body, but of the soul. They did not listen. She performed the rites, channeling energies from realms that should never be touched. The Lord died screaming, and with his last breath, he cursed her. The soldiers, in their fear and fury, turned on her. My father held me back, his hand like iron over my mouth, as I watched my world burn. Her last look was not at her killers, but at me, through the flames. And in that look, I saw a warning and a desperate, unspoken plea. That night, the cold settled into my bones, a cold that has never truly left. My father, broken, tried to shield me from her legacy. He hid her tools, her strange crystals, and ancient books bound in leather that felt like living skin. He wanted a simple life for me, but the spark was already lit. I found her hidden trove, and I found my only solace in those years, a girl named Lyra, with eyes like the summer sky. She was not afraid of the quiet, intense boy who spoke of stars and energies. With her, I felt almost normal, almost human. That fragile peace shattered when the Iron Crown came for my father. The new lord, paranoid and vengeful, demanded a healer for his ailing wife. My father, the best bone setter and herbalist left in the Hailstrom, was taken. We waited for days. Then a single soldier returned, tossing my father's medicine bag into the dirt. He failed, was all he said. The lord's wife had died. My father had been executed for the crime of being unable to perform the impossible. The cold inside me turned to ice. I stood over that discarded bag, Lyra weeping beside me. I did not weep. I made a promise to the empty air, a promise of reckoning. An old clansman, Borin, found me there, my small hands clenched into fists so tight they bled. He took me in. He showed me my father's medicines, but my eyes were always drawn to my mother's artifacts. One evening, I showed Lyra a crystal that glowed with an inner fire. She recoiled, fear in those kind eyes. "It feels hungry, Magnus," she whispered. That was the first crack in our world. She saw a danger I was already in love with. I saw power where she saw peril. The path was splitting beneath our feet, and I was already choosing my direction, one fueled by a grief so vast it could only be filled with understanding. Total understanding. Of everything. The reputation of a boy genius from the oppressed Hailstrom is a curious thing. It is a tool and a weapon. By 14, I was selling conveniences to the bored nobility in their mountain keeps. A music box that played the listener's innermost thought as melody. A lamp that shone with captured sunlight. They saw amusing trinkets. I saw tests. And I saw their faces when the devices inevitably evolved. The melody became a haunting dirge of their secret guilt. The lamp's light revealed hidden truths in their chambers. I left chaos in my wake, a ghost in the machine, and used the coin to fund my true work. For my mother's artifacts sang to me. They were not just objects, they were questions. I began to blend them with my own burgeoning mechanical genius. A gyroscope stabilized by a sliver of ether crystal. A calculating engine powered by ambient psychic energy. I was unraveling the universe's twin threads, the empirical law and the arcane principle, and weaving them into a new tapestry. My tapestry. Born watched, worried. Lyra pleaded, "This path is dark, Magnus. It changes you." She was right. It was changing me. It was making me stronger. The final break with my old life came on a rain-slicked road. A crown patrolman, drunk on authority and ale, cornered me, demanding the Haustrom tax, whatever was in my pockets. He leveled his arc rifle. In that moment, I didn't think. I moved. My hands, guided by a fury older than myself, found his throat. I saw the surprise in his eyes, then the fear, then nothing. I felt the life leave him. I stood there in the mud, the cold rain mixing with the warmth on my hands. I was not horrified. I was resolved. The world operated on a simple principle, force, and I would master every form of it. It was then that the offer came, like a lifeline to a drowning man who had already decided to become the ocean. A scout from the prestigious Athenaeum of Zenith City across the sea. They spoke of scholarships, of nurturing brilliance. I knew better. They wanted to own my mind before some rival kingdom did. I took the offer, not for salvation, but for arsenal. Lyra stood at the clan's edge as I left. No tears, just a profound sadness. "The boy I knew is gone," she said. I did not correct her. The man who boarded that ship was Magnus Vex in name only. I was already becoming something else. Zenith City was a jewel of polished steel and glowing glass, a monument to reason. It was also a cage. The Athenaeum was a playground for the intellectually gifted, and I was their most feral new resident. They gave me a private lab, funded by their military, hoping to direct my inventions toward their wars. I let them think they were. In truth, I was building a different machine entirely. My mother's face haunted my dreams, not with love, but with a silent scream from a place of endless twilight. I was determined to build a bridge to that place, to find her, to demand answers. And then I met him, Alistair Finch, the golden prodigy of the Athenaeum. Where I was sharp edges and simmering silence, he was open collaboration, a dazzling smile, and a mind that moved with frightening grace. We were assigned a joint project, a harmonic resonance engine. He wanted to build it to stabilize weather patterns. I saw a tool to vibrate apart molecular bonds. Our debates in lecture halls were legendary. He would argue for application, for the betterment of all. I would argue for pure understanding, for pushing boundaries regardless of consequence. The faculty watched us like a thrilling duel. I saw him as an obstacle, a living reminder of a path I had not taken, the path of the beloved hero. He tried to befriend me. He once found me late in the main lab, calibrating the dimensional matrices for my bridge. "The energy signature is unstable, Magnus," he said, peering at my schematics with genuine concern. "Your lattice structure here, it could cascade. Let me help you correct it." Pride, hot and poisonous, flooded me. Help? From him? From the man who had everything I had lost? Security, respect, a future of applause? "You understand the rules, Finch," I spat. "You do not understand the realms between them. Do not touch my work." I saw the hurt in his eyes, and I relished it. His weakness was his empathy. My strength would be my will. The night of the experiment is etched into me, sharper than any scar. I activated the bridge in the abandoned sublevels. The air ripped open. Not a window, but a wound. I saw a landscape of swirling anguish, and there, for a fleeting second, was my mother's form. Her mouth opened in a silent warning. Then a presence, a vast, cold sentience from that place reached through the tear. Its touch was not physical. It was the essence of despair given form. It scraped against my soul. The bridge screamed, overloaded, and exploded. I awoke in a med center, my face wrapped in sterile gauze. The pain was secondary to the fury. Finch had been there. He had seen my notes, voiced his doubts. In my mind, his doubt had become sabotage. His compassion was a cloak for jealousy. They expelled me for unauthorized, catastrophic research. As I gathered my few belongings, a military officer offered me a blank check to work in their weapons division. I looked at him, then at the spires of the Athenaeum where Finch remained, the hero. I made my choice. I would not be their tool. I would build my own tools. And my first tool would be a mask. Not to hide the wounds I was sure lay beneath the bandages, but to forge a new face for the world. One it would learn to fear, and then to obey. I wandered the cold places of the world, a ghost with a burning mind. The funds from my zenith trinkets were vast. I established hidden workshops, first in the rusting hull of an old orbital freighter in the frozen north, then in the deep caves of the Kyalan Mountains. My loyal Hailstrom followers, led by the steadfast Borin, became my hands and eyes. I was building more than weapons. I was building a philosophy. Order was not a gentle agreement. It was a structure, and structures required a foundation of unyielding will. It was in the Kyalan range that the legends led me, whispers of an order so old they remembered the first words of science and the first whispers of magic as the same moment. The Brotherhood of the Silent Star. They were not monks of prayer, but monks of principle. They believed the universe was a code to be deciphered, a machine to be mastered. Finding them was a trial that nearly claimed my life. Blizzards, crevices, and creatures of ice and myth tested every ounce of my ingenuity. I survived not on strength, but on sheer, ruthless intellect. I crafted heat from kinetic energy, shelter from force fields, and slew a great ice worm by luring it into a canyon and triggering a harmonic avalanche with my last working gauntlet. When I finally stumbled, half dead, into their hidden monastery, a complex of ancient stone and glowing quantum crystal, they took me in. They healed my body, but they were fascinated by my mind. In 5 years, I learned their millennia of accumulated knowledge. Astrophysics folded into astral projection, quantum mechanics married to quintessential life force theory. I surpassed them. They saw not a student, but a prophecy fulfilled, the unifier. They offered me leadership. I accepted. It was my birthright. From their orbital spire, I monitored the world, and I saw him. Alistair Finch. His experiment, a starship powered by cosmic radiation, was on every newsfeed. He was going to touch the heavens, to become a hero for the ages. The old, familiar ice tightened in my chest. He was reaching for the sky, while I was preparing to reshape the very ground beneath it. It was time. I descended to the monastery's deepest forge. I had designed my armor for years in my mind. It would be a second skin, a system that would interface directly with my nervous system, dampening trivial human frailty, pain, doubt, fatigue. It would amplify my will into actionable force. The monks forged it to my specifications. But the mask was my ritual. I fashioned it myself from a rare psycho-reactive alloy. As I welded the final seam, I did not wait for it to cool. The heat was excruciating, a baptism of fire and metal. I felt it fuse not just to my skin, but to the idea of me. When I lifted it and placed it upon my face, the pain was transcendent. It was the death of Magnus Vex, the orphan, the student, the victim, and it was the birth of something new. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal of the forge. A cold, iron visage stared back. No more. The voice that came from behind the mask was layered, resonant, filtered, and enhanced. You will address me as Kronos. I left the mountains with a single loyal brother from the Silent Star, Lirin, at my side. I had a name, I had a purpose, and I had a kingdom to claim. Not a kingdom of chance birth, but one of deliberate conquest. My homeland, the fractured, oppressed land of my people, now called Varia, awaited its true ruler. Varia was a scar on the map, ruled by the brutish King Venko from his fortress, Blackstone Keep. My return was not a homecoming, it was an audit. I appeared first at a slave quarry,
where Varians broke their backs for the crown. The overseers were armed with shock prods and arrogance. I gave them no speech. I simply demonstrated. My repulsor gauntlet flared, and their machinery became molten slag. I freed the slaves, my voice booming from the mask. Tell the others, Kronos has come. The age of the Iron Crown ends now. I reclaimed my family's ancestral lands, a blasted heath near the site of my mother's death. There, with Lirin and Borin, I built my first fortress, the Bastion. From its halls my robots marched, sleek silver sentinels of my will. The Aelstrom clans, long persecuted, flocked to my banner. They saw a liberator. I saw an army. Yet even among them there were doubts. Old man Kalen, who had sung at my naming ceremony, dared to call me Vanko in shinier metal. His public dissent was a virus. I made an example, not of him, but of the idea. My sentinel immobilized him, and I had him placed under house arrest, fed and cared for, but silenced. The message was clear. Loyalty was absolute. The fear in their eyes now held a new flavor, awe. Lyra came to the Bastion. Time had hardened her beauty into strength. She led a faction of Aelstrom who wanted freedom, not empire. "This is not liberation, Magnus," she said, her voice cutting through my throne room's chill. "This is replacement. You wear a different mask, but you demand the same obedience." To hear my birth name from her lips was a shock. It felt like a relic. "Kronos offers stability," I replied, the mask modulating my voice into a cold, imperial tone. "Magnus could only offer dreams. Dreams are fragile. I am not." I had her escorted out. The girl from the caravan was a ghost. She was an obstacle to the future. The final assault on Blackstone Keep was not a war. It was a systems failure. I hacked their communications, turned their security droids against them, and broadcast Vanko's own secret orders to betray his commanders to the entire garrison. His army crumbled from within. I found Vanko trying to flee through the sewers, a fat rat abandoning his sinking ship. He begged, offered wealth, power sharing. I remembered my father's medicine bag in the mud. I said nothing. My armored hand closed around his throat. The crunch was satisfyingly final. I took his cape, a gaudy thing of crimson fur, and cast it into a brazier. My symbol would be steel, not silk. I was crowned in the ashes of Blackstone, which I renamed Chronopolis. The people cheered. They saw the tyrant fallen. I saw a system reset to zero, ready for my programming. My first act as sovereign was to summon the entity that had touched me in Zenith City, the dweller in the Twilight Realm, which my research named the Hollow King. Using a circle of blood-etched runes and focused tachyon beams, I forced a fragment of its consciousness into our world. The deal was stark. Once per year, I would duel its champion for the right to reclaim my mother's soul, still trapped in its domain. If I failed, my people's love for me would curdle, drop by drop, into hatred. I agreed without hesitation. Redemption was a fairy tale. This was a transaction, and I never intended to lose.
My rule in Valeria was absolute, my borders sealed behind energy shields and diplomatic threats. But my gaze was always global, and on the global stage, he was there. Alistair Finch. His starship experiment had gone interestingly wrong. Bathed in anomalous radiation, he and his 3 crewmates had been transformed. Finch himself gained the power to manipulate his body's molecular structure, elasticity incarnate. He renamed himself the Polymath. His companions became the Aegis, a force field wielder, Nova, a living star, and the Goliath, a being of living stone. They called themselves the Vanguard. The public adored them. I saw a chaotic variable. Their first true interference was a personal insult. The Aegis, Susan Storm, Finch's beloved, was researching dimensional harmonics. My sensors detected her probes near the edges of my shielded territory. I could not allow it. I had her retrieved.
Not with brutality, but with impeccable efficiency. She appeared in my throne room, confused but unbroken. I spoke to Finch directly through a view screen. "You have studied the doorways between worlds, Polymath. Now you will fetch the key." I tasked him, the Goliath, and Nova with a quest through my newly perfected time sled. Retrieve the Chronoscepter of Merlin, a mythical artifact from the Age of Legend. A suicide mission. Or so I thought. They returned, battered but successful. The scepter in their possession thrummed with power that made my armor sensor scream. They had not only survived, they had thrived. My respect for Finch curdled into a deeper, more focused animosity. He was not just lucky, he was adaptable, a pest that evolved to resist a pesticide. My next plan involved the elemental giant, Terrax. I offered him the energy cores of Valeria's western Badlands if he crushed the Vanguard. The battle leveled 2 counties, and in the chaos, a misfired terrakinetic blast hit my own containment module, shrinking me to quantum scale. I found myself in the microverse, a universe in a moat of dust. Even there, at the size of an atom, I was a god. I rallied the protonic civilizations, built a weapon to enlarge my armies and invade the macro world. I was on the verge of conquest when they appeared. The Vanguard, aided by the Inveterate, a hero who could communicate with insects. They rallied the microverse natives against me, beaten by idealism and ants. The humiliation was galactic. Every scheme met a similar end. I assembled a team of powered mercenaries, the Fearsome Four, and they were defeated by a lone vigilante in a crimson suit. I combined the minds of the world's greatest villains into a mega-sentience to hack global networks, and Finch defeated it with a paradoxical logic loop that gave the entity a digital migraine. I even managed, through a brilliant piece of energy siphon technology, to steal the cosmic power of a celestial herald known as the Silver Rider. For 23 glorious hours, I was a sun god. I reshaped continents, held the Vanguard in a force grip over the Atlantic, and prepared my proclamation as Earth's sovereign. Then Finch, damn him, tricked me into punching a hole through a galactic barrier. The cosmic power recoiled, stripping me bare, and returned to its weeping master. I stood in my scarred armor on a melted glacier, the taste of godhood ash in my mouth. He always won, but he won by reacting. I was the architect, and an architect's greatest strength is patience. I would build a better trap. The Secret Wars, they called it. A cosmic game master known only as the Curator abducted heroes and villains, placing us on a patchwork planet, a battle royale for the ultimate prize, our heart's desire. It was a child's game for a child's mind, but the pieces were real. I let the other villains scramble for territory. I observed. I learned. The planet's core held a captive, dying cosmic entity, the Star Eater. Here was a power source not even Finch could comprehend. I orchestrated my capture, allowing myself to be imprisoned in the Vanguard's makeshift brig. From within, I used a hidden transmitter to guide my remaining Doombot to the corpse of a fallen techno-organic villain. From its parts, I built a siphon. I broke free, not to fight them, but to run, straight to the chained, slumbering Star Eater at the world's heart. The siphon bit deep. Agony of a billion suns flooded into me. I was not a man. I was a nexus. I was a god. I turned my gaze to the Curator, who watched from its extra-dimensional gallery with amusement. I flexed my new power. Reality itself wrinkled. "You are an infant with a magnifying glass," I boomed, my voice a symphony of stellar furnaces. "And I am the sun." We clashed. It was a battle of concepts, of rewriting local physics. It was winning. It had me pinned, preparing to dissect my newfound divinity for its collection. Then I activated the failsafe. A microscopic portal on my chest plate opened directly into the siphon, which was still embedded in the Star Eater. I didn't just have its power. I was a direct conduit to its infinite anguish. I redirected that raw, screaming entropy into the Curator. The entity screamed, a sound that broke time in a 5-mile radius. Its power, vast and wild, flowed into me. I had done it. I had stolen the power of a game-making god. I stood on the ruins of Battleworld, now the sole architect of reality. I could reshape matter with a thought. I could hear the prayers of insects. But true godhood, it is lonely, and it is boring. There is no challenge, only maintenance. I found I could not sleep, for my dreams would spawn unintended universes. I could not feel, for my emotions would cause solar flares. I was a prisoner in a palace of my own making. And that is when the curator, using the villainous corpse shell I had discarded, tricked me. It spoke to my lingering human hubris, my buried sentiment. It showed me an illusion of my mother, whole and loving. For a fraction of a second, I desired, I wanted, and in that moment of human weakness, the control slipped. The curator reclaimed its essence in a torrent, leaving me empty, falling from the heavens back to the cold, hard ground of my limitations. Godhood was a lesson. Ultimate power is not about feeling everything. It is about being everything. And I was not yet ready, but I had tasted it, and I would not rest until the feast was mine forever.
A ruler must have an heir, not out of sentiment, but for continuity of vision. In the wreckage of a coup by the ousted Prince Stefan, I found a boy, Christian. His parents, rebels, had been killed in the crossfire. He stood in the rubble, not crying, just staring with eyes that held the same cold fire I recognized in my own reflection. I took him in, not as a ward, but as a protege. I would mold him, teach him not just to rule Varia, but to be Kronos. He was my living legacy, a brain to be imprinted with my will. But the world outside would not allow me to focus. A new threat emerged, the Purple King, a villain whose voice could command the minds of men. The world's governments panicked. I saw an opportunity. I captured him not to imprison, but to instrument. I built the Psyche Prism, an amplifier that could focus his neural command waves into a global signal. With a flip of a switch, I broadcast a single, irresistible imperative to every human mind on the planet: bow to Kronos. For 6 months, I was Emperor of Earth. Wars ceased. Resources were allocated with perfect efficiency. Hunger was eradicated. It was a utopia of silence and order. And it was utterly hollow. There was no struggle, no triumph, no point. When a remnant of heroes, led by the Unbreakable, whose ionic body was immune to mental control, stormed my citadel to destroy the prism, I watched on my monitors. I felt nothing. Not anger, not fear, a profound disinterest. When Unbreakable breached the throne room, I didn't raise a hand. I let him smash the prism. The collective sigh of 7 billion freed minds was almost audible. The utopia dissolved like a mist. My global empire vanished before lunch. The heroes declared a great victory. I returned to Varia. The experiment was concluded. Forced peace is an oxymoron. True order must be chosen, even if the choice is an illusion I meticulously craft. My next project was deeply personal. My mother's soul remained in the grip of the Hollow King. To wage this war, I needed an ally in the mystical arts. I forced a confrontation with the Sorcerer Supreme, Arcanus. After a duel that bent reality over the Himalayas, he was bound by magical covenant to grant me a boon. I demanded his aid to storm the Twilight Realm. Together, we descended into a landscape of memory and despair. We found her, a specter of light in the gloom. The price for her freedom was a soul swap. Arcanus, in a moment of foolish nobility, offered himself. The ritual was performed. My mother's spirit was thrust into the mortal world, while Arcanus was chained in her place. But the magic had a cruel twist. To be free, her soul had to be repulsed by its tether to hell. And what was that tether? Me. My actions, my descent, my pact. As she realized the cost of her freedom, the noble sorcerer damned, and her son as the architect,
A pure, undiluted hatred for me bloomed in her eyes. That hatred was the final key. It purified her spirit, burning away the last stain of the Hollow King's domain. With a final, withering look that held no love, only revulsion, she ascended, not to hell, but beyond, to a peace I could never touch. Arcanus, trapped, asked me later if I knew that would happen. I looked at my hands, the hands that had built and destroyed so much. "There are always costs, sorcerer," I said, my voice flat behind the mask. "The calculation is simply whether the objective is worth the price." I had freed my mother's soul, and in doing so, I had forever cemented my role as the monster of her story. It was a price I had calculated and found acceptable.
Reality itself began to sicken. Incursions, moments where parallel Earths would collide, annihilating each other. The cause was a cosmic cancer, planted by ancient beings known as the Architects. They had seeded every universe with a living bomb, a molecule man. I learned this from the being himself, a lonely, fractured entity named Owen. He showed me the truth. The multiverse was a timed explosion, and the clock was at 2 minutes to midnight. The so-called heroes, a cabal of intellectuals led by Alistair Finch, chose a path of pathetic triage. They would destroy approaching Earths to save their own, becoming murderers to postpone the inevitable. A coward's calculus. I chose a different path. With Owen's guidance, I began a journey across the dying multiverse. My mission, not to destroy the molecule men, but to recruit them, to gather the very bombs meant to end everything and turn them into a weapon to save what remained. For years, I traversed the bleeding edges of reality. I became a myth, a phantom. I amassed followers, the Black Swans, who saw me not as a man, but as Rabum Alal, the great destroyer who would end the suffering of a dying cosmos. I would arrive at a universe in its final hours, confront its molecule man, and offer not death, but purpose. Some came willingly, others required persuasion. I assembled an army of living cosmic weapons. When Finch's Illuminati finally pieced together the truth and confronted me in my library of worlds, it was too late. I stood before them not as a rival, but as a salvager. "You have been treating the symptoms," I intoned. "I am imputing the disease." With my legion of molecule men, I led an assault on the realm of the Architects themselves. It was not a battle of fists, but of foundational concepts. We unraveled their equations of destruction. We turned their own design against them. In a silent flash of transcendent logic, the Architects were unmade. The power they had wielded, the power to build and break realities, did not vanish. It flowed into the last molecule man, and through him, to me. I stood amidst the corpse of the multiverse. Only fragments remained, a few dozen universes floating in a void. I took those fragments and I began to build. Not a universe, a world. Battleworld. A patchwork planet of saved realities, each existing in its own domain, under a single unbreakable rule: mine. I was no longer Kronos, I was God Emperor. I had saved all that could be saved, and I had done it my way. On Battleworld, I ruled from my Deal's Tower for 8 years. Absolute. Unchallenged. I had a wife, a version of Susan Storm from a reality where Finch never existed. I had children, Franklin and Valeria. I had everything I had ever ostensibly fought for: power, family, respect. And it was lacking. The constant, grating absence was challenge. There was no Finch to outthink, no principle to defy. I was the principle. I began to wonder if my rival, in his endless, frustrating resistance, had not been my greatest gift. Of course, he found a way. A life raft from the dead Earth 616. Finch, the Goliath, and the Panther, king of Wakanda, hidden on my world. They stirred rebellion. They sought the truth. When they finally stood before me in the heart of my power, I felt it. A spark. The old, cold fire. Finch, ever the moralist, accused me of playing God. "This world is a lie, Kronos," he shouted. "It's built on corpses." I could have erased them with a thought. Instead, I engaged. We debated. We fought. A clash of ideas made flesh. He could not beat my power, but he questioned my right to wield it. The crisis came when my loyal sheriff, Arcanus, a version of the sorcerer from my world, helped the rebels. I executed him for treason. My own daughter, Valeria, looked at me with betrayal in her eyes. The perfect world was cracking, and the fault line was my own hypocrisy. I had built a system that could not tolerate a single dissenting voice, including those of my own family. The final confrontation was not with armies, but with a choice. Owen, the molecule man, the battery of my godhood, presented it. He had bonded with Finch. He saw in him the creativity I had long stifled in my quest for control. "He can rebuild," Owen said to me, his voice echoing in the cosmic chamber. You can only preserve." The power, the divine fire I held, was offered to Finch. And in that moment, I saw the truth. I had saved the multiverse, but I could only ever rule its corpse. To give it life again required a different kind of mind, a mind that built not out of fear of chaos, but out of love for possibility. I did the one thing I had never done. I conceded. Not to him, but to the logic of the universe. "Do it," I said, the words ash in my mouth. The power flowed from me to Finch. Battleworld dissolved in a burst of creative light. A new, vibrant multiverse began to bloom from his hands. I awoke in the gardens of my palace in Varia. My armor was gone. The scars on my face were gone. Healed. A final gift, or a final insult from Finch. My memories of godhood were faded, like a fever dream. The world believed Kronos had died a hero, saving everything. Only I knew the weight of the crown I had worn, and the freedom of having set it down. Lyra came to see me. She saw the man, not the mask. "What now, Magnus?" she asked. I looked out over Varia, my country, not my empire. The people went about their lives, free. They had law, order, prosperity, legacies of my rule, but now their possession. I had spent a lifetime believing the world needed to be forced into shape to be safe. I saw now that safety was not the point. Growth was, and growth requires the risk of disorder. "Now," I said, my voice my own for the first time in decades, quiet and human. "Now, I learn." The path of Kronos was ended. The path of Magnus Vex, perhaps it was just beginning. The greatest mind on Earth was finally facing its most complex, terrifying, and fascinating puzzle. How to be a man. And for the first time, I did not have the answer. I only had the question. And that was enough.